Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX4, and EX4 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration on the Blue Flare deck. So on Bandai's website, they generally build a couple of base builds based on the cards that are going to be supporting inside of the set, and the base build that they're going to be going with is going to be a deck centered around Grey Knights, which utilizes both Blue Flares and Twilights to try to make this amalgamation of a Digimon to try to do something very strong. But I don't think that the card is very strong, and thus I don't have any faith in the deck being anywhere near competitive. But they just kind of have a nice base build laid out for you that's utilizing a Blue Flare core or engine with a little bit of Dark Knight and Skull Knight stuff splashed in for good measure. But this is its own strategy, and I definitely think that the new parts and pieces that we got are better supporting their own respective decks rather than combining them into this deck. So if you're unfamiliar with what Blue Flares is actually trying to do, Blue Flares is trying to strip the opponent's Digimon of their inheritable sources, try to stunlock their Digimon, and take advantage of the fact that they have 2 or more Digimon in play to be able to line up some very specific abilities to keep them stunlocked and to be able to put a lot of pressure onto the opponent. But the big drawback of the deck is the fact that the opponent can actually play around this strategy, and a lot of these new parts and pieces help alleviate the deck's biggest weakness. So that's just their interpretation on how to build Grey Knights, and this is going to be my interpretation on how to approach utilizing all of the parts and pieces from EX4 inside of Blue Flares. So, starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be only running 4 Digitamas. If you want to run a 5th Digitama, you can. It doesn't necessarily matter as long as your Digitama is just helping you draw cards, and Wanyamon right now is just one of the best draw engine Digitamas that we have, only requiring us to have a Blue Tamer on our field to start gaining benefits from, which in a cross-based deck, we want to try to set up our Tamers as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can, making this just the best egg. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gaossmon. So this is the BT10 version of Gaossmon, and this is still just one of the best cards for us to aggress with, just because we could use his low DP and on deletion ability to try to chip at the opponent, hoping that he'll end up getting deleted. So we could play a level 4 Blue Flare traded Digimon for free, and then be able to trigger its on-play effect, just because all of the level 4 Blue Flares do have on-play effects to increase the amount of impact and value that our cards have. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Dracomon. So this is the BT11 version of Dracomon, and this is just another pretty decent support tool for the deck to use. So passively, while this card is sitting on our field, we're going to want to try to hard play our other Blue Flare traded Digimon anyway, and for doing that, this card rewards us with drawing a card. And if it's in the inheritable sources of our Digimon, then we still get some benefit for playing our other Blue Flare traded Digimon by him rewarding us some memory. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the brand new EX4 version of Gaossmon. So the EX4 version of Gaossmon is doing something very similar to what we just saw with our Dracomon, where it's just rewarding us when we're going to be playing our Blue Flare traded cards. So it's just helping us draw some extra cards in that respect, and then if we pair this up with our new Duo Tamer, which is part Twilight, then it also adds some extra recyclability for further usability. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Greymon. So this is the starter deck Greymon, and this Greymon, even though it's a red Digimon and we have no way to efficiently Digivolve into this card, we don't necessarily care. We just care about the fact that his inheritable ability says Security Tech 1 and his name says Greymon, so that way we could utilize him as a Digicross material for our level 5 Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Kumamon. So Kumamon is a tech or flex spot, and it could really be anything you want it to be. I just like having hybrids to act as alternative win conditions to surprise the opponent and be able to steal games that I might not have been able to otherwise. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Greymon. So this is the BT10 version of Greymon, and this Greymon is a really good card to help with the overall consistency of the deck because he has a relatively low play cost and a nice on-play ability that we could also combo with our Gaossmon. So he's just going to allow us to be able to look for 2 blue flare traded cards off the top 4 of our deck, and if we have a Kiriha already set up, then we have the alternative option to be able to return a MetalGreymon from our trash back into our hand instead. So we have different ways to be able to pick and choose which ability we want based on what stage we are in the game. Then he comes with the nice handy dandy on delete ability of save, so that way when he gets deleted, he gets to hide himself underneath a tamer to be able to use as material for a Digicross later in the game, on top of the fact that it allows us to be a little bit more aggressive with this card if we really wanted to. Then on top of that, he also comes with a nice inheritable ability that's also trying to increase the overall damage output of the deck as long as the opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play, and the Digimon we're going to be swinging with is a blue flare traded Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of MailBirdramon. So this is the BT10 version of MailBirdramon, and this is another really decent card at being able to help set up our tamer if one already isn't set up. Then, as we just saw with the Greymon, it also has that modular ability where if our tamer is already set up, then we could use it to be able to grab back MetalGreymons from our trash while doing some very similar things as the Greymon, having a nice on-delete ability of save himself, and a good inheritable ability to try to further stunlock the opponent's Digimon as long as they have 2 or more Digimon in play, and again, we're swinging with our blue flare traded Digimon, which was both the strength and the weakness of the deck. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Greymon. So this is the brand new EX4 version of Greymon, and it's trying to do something very similar to what we just saw with our original BT10 Greymon, where it's just acting as another consistency tool, looking more specifically for our Kiriha Tamer and our blue or black Digicross cards. And then we are going to be trashing the rest, so that way we could use some of our various other abilities to be able to potentially grab back whatever was trashed. Then he also has the on-delete ability of save, with a nice inheritable ability that's not limited to the opponent needing to have 2 or more Digimon in play to gain benefit from, which is just drawing an extra card when we're going to be attacking. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of the brand new EX4 MailBirdramon. So this is another pretty decent card for us to use. Not only is its on-play ability having a nice ability to stop it and de-incentivize the opponent's Digimon from wanting to attack by giving them a debuff of losing memory when they do, but it also has the nice on-delete ability of save to be able to hide it underneath our tamer for material later on, while having a nice inheritable ability, again, that doesn't need the opponent to have 2 or more Digimon in play to gain any benefit from, and the effect that we're gaining off of this card is the jamming ability, which pairs very nicely with Security Attack Plus, so we could get as much damage as we possibly can in as safely as we possibly can. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 2 copies of MetalGreymon X Antibody. So MetalGreymon X Antibody we are going to be using just because he has the alternative Digivolution condition to Digivolve off of a MetalGreymon, not specific to any color, just specific to the name, for 0, so that way we could gain full benefit off of his when Digivolving ability on allowing him to gain Security Attack Plus and an extra 3000 DP until the end of the opponent's turn, so that way we can try to deal, again, as much damage as we possibly can without the opponent needing to have 2 or more Digimon on the field. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of MetalGreymon. So this is the BT10 version of MetalGreymon, and this is still going to be the preferred MetalGreymon just because its ability is actually fully usable and really, really powerful to us versus the new MetalGreymon, which it's specifically a slightly weaker version of this card that also wants to interact with Grey Knightsmon, which we're not running. but regardless, it has the Digicross 2 ability, utilizing any Greymon and any MailBirdramon to reduce its play cost by 2 for each one that we use. So if we use both of them, it's going to be a level 5 that we're going to hard play for 3 instead of for 7, so that way we could try to gain its on-play ability of allowing this Digimon to gain the rush ability, and if we Digicrossed, then we get to have up to 3 of the opponent's Digimon that has equal or less sources than this Digimon basically gets stun locked. So it's a good way at stopping both of the opponent's offense and defense while allowing us to be able to aggress at the same time. Then it even has the nice material save ability of 2, so that way we could put the sources that we just put underneath him for his Digicross ability back underneath our Tamer to line up another Digicross when he gets deleted, if he gets deleted. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 2 copies of MetalGreymon from EX4. So MetalGreymon from EX4 does have a Digicross ability, except this time it's looking more specifically for blue Greymons, so we can't use the red Greymon with this card, and any MailBirdramon, so that is something you are going to have to take note of, but it's another level 5 utilizing both Digimon that we could hard play for 3, so that way we could try to be as efficient with our aggression as we possibly can, because this also has a nice on-play ability of allowing the Digimon to gain rush for the turn, while also trashing the opponent's inheritables off of their Digimon. Then he also comes with the Material Save 2 ability to be able to save the sources, and we're not going to be able to utilize his inheritable ability at all because we're not going to be playing Gaossmon. And then the last Digimon of the deck, and only level 6 of the deck, is going to be 2 copies of ZeigGreymon. So this version of ZeigGreymon does have an alternative Digivolution condition where we're going to be Digivolving it for 2 on top of our MetalGreymons. We will have to pay the full 3 if we're going to be Digivolving it on top of our MetalGreymon X Antibody, but the fact that we actually can Digivolve it on top of our MetalGreymon X Antibody is still a huge plus on adding to the overall usability and synergy of our cards. Then, when we Digivolve up into this Digimon, at worst, we're going to be able to unsuspend the Digimon, and at best, we're going to be able to gain some extra memory back for Digivolving it, as long as we have a Blue Flare or Cross Hearts traded Digimon in his Digivolution sources, which we reasonably should have, allowing us to be able to Digivolve into this card more efficiently for less memory. And then he even comes with a nice on-delete ability of save, not only saving himself, but allowing us to add a blue Greymon and a MailBirdramon from our trash underneath one of our general tamers, which we're still running some general tamers in the deck, and you do have to keep that in mind that this doesn't interact with the new Kiriha and Nene tamer, but the fact that we're able to grab back some of our sources to be able to use to line up some extra Digicrosses is really, really nice when we're trying to aggress with this card. Then it even has a nice inheritable ability for us to use, where if we're able to get this card underneath our blue flares in its sources, then it's going to be able to give it the blocker ability, which could be pretty handy at trying to have alternative ways at stopping some of the opponent's potential aggression. Next, on to the tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Kiriha. So this is the BT10 Kiriha, this is our Blue Flare General and Memory Setting Tamer, so that way we could try to make our plays as efficient as we possibly can, because a lot of our Digicrosses are based on us having 3 memory, which this card sets up nicely. Then this card also has the extra upside on allowing us to use the Digimon in his sources as material to use for our Digicrosses, so that way we could try to line up our Digicrosses as efficiently as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Kiriha and Nene. So Kiriha and Nene, you do have to keep in mind this is not a general, but this is both a Blue Flare and a Twilight traded card, and it also is going to be treated as a Kiriha, so it still has a lot of really good synergy with the deck. On top of the fact that it's going to be an extra way for us to gain some extra resources, as long as the opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play, and it also allows us to be able to Digicross in some various other ways, where when we're going to be Digicrossing, we could use Digimon from underneath our tamers, or even our trash, to be able to use as material for that Digicross. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be one copy of Taiki, Kiriha, and Nene. So the Tri-Tamer is still a pretty decent card at having its own level of usability, just because it's also a blue flare traded card and it's also a general card, on top of the fact that it's a way to generate some resources and try to dig for the cards that we need, just because at the start of our main phase, we're going to be putting a blue flare traded Digimon underneath it to be able to gain a memory and draw a card, which cycles and filters our deck and gives us more memory to be able to do more powerful things. Then it also has that secondary ability that we just saw with our Kiriha, letting us use the Digimon underneath our tamers to use as material to line up our Digicrosses. And then lastly, onto the options, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Blazing Memory Boost. So Blazing Memory Boost is an absolutely insane card at being able to try to help set us up while dig for cards as best as it possibly can. So what the card is doing more specifically is it's allowing us to add 2 blue flare traded cards into our hand and to be able to play a Kiriha from among them, which is just a lot of extra value, on top of the fact that it has a delay ability of gaining 2 memory, while also being a blue flare traded card itself. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Ice Wall. So Ice Wall is still an absolutely insanely strong card. It's so strong that it did get restricted down to 1 copy, just because the ability to give all of the opponent's Digimon a nice debuff of when attacking to lose 2 memory really is a huge de-incentivization tool for 1 memory at shutting off the opponent's potential aggression. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Sourai. So Sourai is kind of the big removal card for the deck, except we don't necessarily care about removing the opponent's Digimon because we actually want them to have a field of Digimon, so that way we could try to stunlock them and gain as much value and effects as we possibly can off of our cards. So instead, we're actually going to try to have alternative ways at stunlocking their Digimon, with this being the best at also removing the opponent's inheritable sources, and no Digimon with Digivolution sources are able to attack us, so it's just a really good way at potentially stopping some of the opponent's potential aggro, while also stripping the opponent's Digimon, putting them in range of some of our card effects. And then the last card of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Hammerspark. So Hammerspark is still just a very powerful card at being able to gain us some instant tempo by having us gain 1 memory on the spot, which we could use to line up some extra Digicrosses or various other power plays with a lot of our other cards. Then its security ability is the exact same as what we just saw with Ice Wall at gaining us 2 memory, so it's a good anti-tempo tool against the opponent, putting them off not only just their tempo, but potential game plan as well. And then when it comes to the overall game plan and gameplay of the deck, you are basically just trying to line up your Digicrosses and use your MetalGreymons to be as aggressive as we possibly can, while also potentially trying to stunlock the opponent's Digimon. So when it comes to our level 3s, it really doesn't matter which one we're going to be using in our raising area, as long as we just have a level 3 to be able to get us going. The best one is obviously going to be the BT10 one, just because its on-delete ability will help us trigger all of the on-play effects off of all of our various level 4 Digimon to gain even further value. But if you have to go into the other ones, it's not that big of a deal, just because you could still be aggressive and try to chip the opponent, and if you just want to use their passive abilities while we're hard playing our Digimon, then we gain some extra benefits, and mostly the extra card draw, to try to help make the deck as consistent as we possibly can. So it doesn't necessarily matter what level 3 that we're going to be using, and we're going to be very rarely digivolving into our level 4 Digimon. If you are actually trying to digivolve into your level 4 Digimon, obviously Dracomon is the best one, just because he actually has an inheritable ability for us to use. But most of the time, we're not actually looking to digivolve past our level 3s when it comes to the usage of our raising areas. Instead, we're trying to just use our level 4s and various other cards and even level 3s to try to draw as many cards as we possibly can, so that way we could try to A, find our tamers and set up our tamers, B, try to line up all of the materials we need for our Digicross, and C, actually find the Digicross Digimon and some of our other combo pieces to be able to aggress as effectively and powerfully as we possibly can. So when it comes to extra consistency, especially on our level 4s, that's where the Greymons come in, just because they're both acting as good digging tools to try to make sure that we could find our parts and pieces, and that's also where Blazing Memory Boost comes in, to trying to help us find our parts and pieces as well. But Blazing Memory Boost is usually going to be your go-to turn 1 card, especially now that we have an increased amount of Kirihas in the deck to add to the overall consistency on its success rate. But regardless, we're just looking for, on our level 4s, our various other parts and pieces to be able to line up our Digicrosses. The starter deck of Greymon is literally in here just because he says Greymon and he has Security Attack +1, so that way we could use him in combination with our MetalGreymon from BT10 to be able to aggress with a Rusher with Security Attack +1, which is where the new MailBirdramon comes in handy, because it also will allow our Digimon to gain jamming, and there is no downside to utilizing that type of a stack with Greymon and MailBirdramon with our MetalGreymon, just because it's not requiring the opponent to have any specific amount of Digimon to utilize its abilities like we do have with our old MailBirdramon and our old Greymon. But the old Greymon allowing us to be able to multi-attack at least is pretty comparable to Security Attack +1, so that way we could try to be as aggressive as we possibly can. Then in this type of a position, utilizing whatever Digimon we have with our MetalGreymons, it just allows us to use a card like MetalGreymon X Antibody to further extend the amount of damage. So in the Dream Stack situation, utilizing our Greymon and our MailBirdramon, if we used them to Digicross into our MetalGreymon, and then Digivolve the MetalGreymon into MetalGreymon X Antibody, that's going to be 3 security checks at 11k with jamming that could come out of nowhere for only 3 memory, which is just pretty powerful and pretty aggressive at times. And then that just allows us to be able to use a card like ZeigGreymon to be able to essentially Digivolve for 1, because we're going to be gaining the memory back for having Blue Flare traded Digimon in our inheritable sources somewhere, to be able to unsuspend and gain an extra damage, so that way we could potentially hit really hard really quickly. And so that's kind of why the extra memory gain off of our memory boosts, Hammer Sparks, and Tamers is super important, so that way we can have enough memory to be able to do everything we need to deal as much damage to the opponent as we possibly can. And then that's kind of why a card like the new MetalGreymon is extra important into the deck. Even though we can't use it with our Greymon, it's still just the fact that we have more accessibility at being able to utilize the same parts and pieces to be able to line up a Digicross and a Rush play to do something very similar. But the fact that we still have that same level of play as what we can do as our BT10 MetalGreymon is still really powerful and allows us to be really aggressive with our cards, which is all we're trying to do, is just line up our Digicrosses and make as aggressive pushes onto the opponent as we possibly can. Then we do have the ability to play the deck in alternative means, still utilizing a lot of these new parts and pieces. So I previously had a red flare deck that's basically acting like Dorbickmon, utilizing a red draw package between low-level Digimon and options to be able to try to dig out the parts and pieces that we need to line up our Digicross combo play. And then you don't even have to run the red cards if you really don't want to, and we could still just double down and focus on the blue flare synergies that we do have and can play around with. So doubling down on a blue flare core or base, I think this is a pretty solid 40 card start for you to think about and customize from here based on what you want to gain out of the deck and your own personal playstyle preferences and expected meta. And then we still have even more customization options that you could think about including into the deck. So when it comes to thinking about other level 3s, we do have some floodgates that we could run in the form of Syakomon and Madoki Betamon. Then we do have other Digimon that are going to be interacting with tamers like the Jellymon, and even the option of Starling Thunder to be able to try to bounce the opponent's tamers back to their hand for the use of our Jellymon as well. Then we do have just some other generically good cards that we could run, like the Security Promo Blukamon or the Searcher Gabu that's looking for our tamers. Then we do have other cards inside of the Blue Flare archetype that we could think about running as well. So we could go back to utilizing DeckardDramon and ZeigGreymon as two very powerful cards, not only adding some extra protection and stun lock ability, but because they can shove Digimon underneath their inheritables, it allows us to be able to utilize some of our cards alternatively. And if you want that same type of mentality, you also could think about running CyberDramon, even though CyberDramon himself isn't that great. And we even have MetalGreymon in Cyber Launcher as just another card doing something very similar to DeckardGreymon, just we don't need DeckardDramon in order to make it super usable. Then when it comes to other level 6s, we could think about splashing in some various other level 6s just because they allow us to be able to do potentially more various different things. So Kazuhamon is another really good one that synergizes with the deck just because we could split apart our inheritables, get the low-level Digimons on play abilities off, on top of the fact that it allows us to use a yellow or blue option, like our memory boost, to be able to help set us up. So there's just some pretty decent synergy there that we could play into. Then we do have some various other level 7s that we could think about running, like a whole bunch of different Omnimons, or even DeathXmon, just because DeathXmon can be splashed into basically any kind of deck. And we even could think about utilizing Cross 7 Superior Mode. Even though we aren't running any Shoutmons to be able to utilize our trash, we could just try drawing a whole bunch to be able to utilize his Digicross Infinity to reduce it by as much as we possibly can, but the fact that it's still just a really powerful removal effect that we could try to take advantage of is the big appeal of this card. And then on top of that, we do have both black and other blue options that we could use if we want to run various forms of removal. And then we have some extra utility options that we could think about running, again depending on your type of build, along with some extra utility on various different tamers that are interacting with both Greymons and source removal. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.